The night smelled faintly of rain, and the soft hum of the street lamp outside barely lit our living room. I had been waiting for him to return home, as I always did, but the sound of his footsteps felt different that evening. Heavy, distracted, almost guilty. When he walked in, he didn't smile at me. He barely glanced at our child before disappearing into his bedroom. And in that moment, a cold understanding settled over me. He had chosen someone else. I knew nothing I could say would change it. And I knew that for my child and for myself, I had to disappear. I remember when we first married. Life was simple, full of small routines and filled with quiet hope. We shared small joys, weekend walks, school projects, late night talks about dreams. He was charming, protective, and attentive, at least in those early years. Money was never abundant, but we managed. I took care of the home, the child, and even the small savings we had tucked away. I never cared much about status, only about love and security. But I began to notice cracks. He seemed restless, distant sometimes. Conversations about the future felt like rehearsed scripts. Some evenings I caught him staring at his phone, smiling faintly at messages I wasn't supposed to see. Our families were a quiet tension. Mine always protective and cautious. His always polished, ambitious, and sometimes critical. I always tried to fit in, never asking for more than respect and simple love. Yet the warning signs were there, subtle and slow. The late-night meetings, the unexplained calls, the small smiles at a screen that wasn't mine. I told myself not to overthink. I reminded myself that trust was the foundation of our family, but the seed of doubt had been planted, quietly growing in the corners of my mind. I often sat in the kitchen, sipping tea while our child played nearby, thinking about how fragile trust can be. It felt like the walls of our home were holding secrets I could not yet see, and that one day, everything might shift. And that day came sooner than I expected. It began with a simple slip, a message on his phone left open on the table. I didn't read it at first, I simply stared. But curiosity, and the faint smell of a perfume that wasn't mine, drew me closer. The texts revealed months of conversations, plans, and laughter with someone else. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, but the details were precise, the timing consistent, and the tone intimate. When he finally came home that night, I didn't confront him. I only watched him. He passed by, kissed our child absent-mindedly, and went to his room. I realized then that confrontation was useless. The choice had been made. And I also realized that for my child and myself, I had only one choice left: to disappear, quietly, before our lives were completely rearranged by someone else's selfishness. The days that followed were a quiet torment. He continued his routine, smiling faintly at the world, but never at home. I tried to maintain normalcy for our child: breakfasts, school routines, small conversations, but the atmosphere felt heavy, like a thick fog that no words could pierce. I began noticing the private costs of his choices, the money he had hidden in small, secretive ways, the late-night dinners paid for without explanation, the small messages I intercepted that spoke of trips, gifts, and moments that should have been ours. Loneliness wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. Even our child noticed. "Why doesn't Baba smile like before?" he asked softly one morning. I hugged him tightly. "Sometimes grown-ups are busy thinking," I said, forcing calm into my voice. I began keeping notes. Every late night, every suspicious smile, every hidden transaction. It was not for confrontation, it was preparation. Evenings became long and quiet. I cooked, cleaned, and pretended everything was ordinary. But inside, a storm of strategy was forming. I knew that if I wanted peace and protection for my child, I had to plan my disappearance carefully. Every day, the tension grew quietly. I would wake early, prepare breakfast, and watch my child eat with the innocence I wished he could keep forever. Meanwhile, my husband's late nights became routine. Some nights I heard laughter through the walls, not ours, not the laughter of family. I tried to maintain the rhythm of ordinary life, school bags packed, lunches prepared, bedtime stories read with gentle smiles. But even these simple acts felt heavy under the shadow of his choice. The small betrayals began stacking up. A new perfume on his clothes, never explained. Hidden bank statements I accidentally glimpsed in the drawer. Messages he left open on his laptop that betrayed intimacy I had never shared. I did not confront him. I could see the truth in his eyes, the carelessness, the emotional drift towards someone else. Instead, I took mental notes, quietly, meticulously. Each detail mattered. Each small observation was another step toward protecting my child and myself. Loneliness was constant. I would watch him interact with our child, carefully measuring the love in his voice. It was there, sometimes, but hollow, distracted, preoccupied. I began sleeping lightly, my mind alert to every door opening, every distant phone buzz. Even a casual comment, a glance at the street outside, became part of the map I was drawing to navigate the next months of our lives. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found an envelope hidden in the back of a closet. Inside were bank statements, small envelopes with cash, and even travel itineraries, all carefully planned, all carefully hidden. He had been building a life separate from ours, a life that did not include me. I did not scream, I did not confront. I simply sat down on the floor, holding my child's doll in my hands, realizing for the first time how fragile the world I had trusted really was. In that quiet moment, I understood that I had the power to choose. I could confront him, but it would change nothing. I could wait, hoping he might return to the family he had abandoned emotionally, but I had already seen the signs. And then clarity struck. For my child's safety, for my own peace, I had to disappear quietly. The plan was not revenge, it was protection. The plan was not about anger, it was about preservation. And so, in the soft sunlight filtering through the living room window, I began to prepare. I began with small, deliberate steps. I organized my documents, birth certificates, school papers, small savings accounts. I started observing his patterns more closely, which nights he returned late, how long he stayed on calls, the times he was absent-minded. I spoke less, I smiled less, but never coldly. I also confided in one trusted older friend, a woman who had seen life's betrayals and survived quietly. She told me, softly, "Patience is power, dignity is strength, and when the time comes, you will act, not in anger, but in clarity." I realized she was right. I did not need dramatic confrontation. I did not need loud accusations. All I needed was preparation, a plan, and courage. Each night after my child slept, I would sit in the kitchen with a notebook, writing everything down. Receipts, unusual transactions, travel dates, observations of his hidden life. It became a ritual, a silent act of empowerment. I reminded myself daily, you are protecting your child. You are choosing peace over chaos. You are choosing clarity over illusions. Even in the midst of planning, I found moments of calm. I watched my child play, laughed softly at his little jokes, and kissed him goodnight with love that felt stronger than ever. I realized then that strength does not roar. It whispers quietly in the choice to protect, in the courage to leave, in the patience to wait for the right moment. I forgave him silently, not for his sake, but for mine. Holding anger would only weigh me down. I wanted freedom, clarity, and the ability to rebuild life gently for my child. In that quiet reflection, I understood the truth. Betrayal can hurt deeply, but dignity and calm can heal. The night before I planned to leave, the house was unusually quiet. My child slept soundly, unaware of the storm of decisions quietly brewing in my mind. I packed lightly, carefully, just enough for a few days, essentials and small keepsakes that would remind us of the life we were protecting. I left a note on the kitchen table. Not long, not dramatic, just truth. I chose to protect our child and myself. Please respect our space. I read it once, then folded it neatly. This was not revenge. This was not anger. This was calm. I spent hours double-checking my plans, the route I would take, the small guest house I had booked, the contact of a trusted friend who would quietly assist if needed. Every step was measured, every move calculated. And still, I allowed myself one quiet moment. Sitting by the window, watching the soft glow of street lamps, reflecting on how far we had come and how strong I had become. The morning arrived with muted sunlight, soft and forgiving. I prepared breakfast with care, keeping routines calm so my child felt nothing amiss. When he woke, I hugged him tightly. "Betha, we are going on a little trip, just you and me." He smiled sleepily, trusting as always. That trust, pure and unbroken, was my anchor. I carried his small backpack, took his hand, and quietly walked out the door. The note on the table was simple, yet it carried the weight of everything unsaid. I did not look back. I did not glance at the rooms we had shared. All that mattered was the soft grip of his hand and the safety we were stepping toward. When he returned later that day, he found silence. No arguments, no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. The note rested on the kitchen table, neatly folded, waiting. He picked it up, scanning the words, and then looked around the empty rooms. The dining table, the living room, the bedroom, everything in order, but devoid of life that mattered most. I was already gone. He could see the absence, but it was a quiet lesson, not a scream. I had left nothing to argue over, nothing to yell about, just calm clarity and the weight of consequences. I knew he would feel the impact, not immediately, perhaps, but surely. The realization of what his choices had cost him would settle in slowly, silently, in the quiet corners of the house we once shared. We arrived at the small guest house I had arranged. It smelled faintly of lavender, the curtains soft and gentle, the light warm and forgiving. My child looked around, curious but calm. "Mom, where's Baba?" he asked softly. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Sometimes grown-ups make choices we don't understand, but we are safe, and that is what matters. He nodded and ran to the small bed, laughing at a small toy car I had packed. In that moment, I felt the reward of patience, preparation, and courage. All the sleepless nights, all the quiet observations, all the careful planning, it had led to this peaceful, protective moment. Later, I sat with him by the window, watching the soft evening light. I reflected on the journey. Nothing dramatic had occurred. No shouting, no chaos, just calm, deliberate action. I realized then that strength does not need to be loud. It can be measured in preparation, in patience, in silent courage. I had chosen dignity over revenge. I had chosen peace over confrontation. And most importantly, I had chosen the safety and happiness of my child over the illusion of a family that no longer existed. In that quiet triumph, I understood that life sometimes demands difficult choices, and the strongest path is often the calmest. The first days after leaving were quiet, but not empty. The small guest house I had found was modest, but filled with sunlight that streamed gently through the windows. Every corner was warm and soft, a safe cocoon for my child and me. I unpacked slowly, deliberately. Each item, clothes, books, toys, was placed carefully, a small act of reclaiming control. My child explored the space with curiosity, laughter spilling freely, unburdened by the shadows of our past. For the first time in months, I felt calm. Not relief, not fleeting happiness, but a deep, steady sense of safety and clarity. We were free in our own way, free from betrayal, free from hurt, free from the pretense of a family that no longer existed in truth. I spent the early mornings watching my child play. He was innocent, unknowing of the complexity that had led to our escape. I realized then that the moments of calm, laughter, and gentle guidance were my true victories. I reflected on betrayal, not with bitterness, but with understanding. He had chosen another life. I had chosen courage. He had sought temporary happiness. I had found lasting peace. I learned that love does not always mean staying together. Sometimes love means walking away quietly, protecting what matters most, and allowing life to unfold without chaos. I forgave, not for him, but for me. Holding on to anger would only weigh me down. Forgiveness freed me to act with clarity, compassion, and patience. I established boundaries, carefully and deliberately. No unnecessary contact, no calls, no confrontations, no explanations. I wanted the separation to be peaceful, dignified, and protective. I also focused on rebuilding routines, preparing meals together, reading bedtime stories, weekend walks in the park, quiet study sessions for schoolwork. Each act became a ritual of stability and love. Through these small routines, I rebuilt a life of safety and predictability for my child without the stress and betrayal that had haunted our old home. Over time, I realized that the quietest choices are often the strongest. Leaving had been difficult, yes, but necessary. Choosing calm over confrontation, clarity over chaos, and protection over revenge had given me a life I could finally trust. I smiled more often now. I laughed freely with my child. Even the small joys, like making pancakes together or reading stories by the window, felt profound because they were chosen deliberately, without fear or distraction. I realized that betrayal can hurt deeply, but dignity, preparation, and quiet courage can heal and protect more than anger ever could. Looking back, I understood this. Life does not always give us fair choices. Sometimes the people we love the most will hurt us, but strength lies in the quiet, patient, and thoughtful decisions we make in response. I chose peace. I chose my child. I chose clarity and dignity. And that choice changed everything. Months had passed since we left. The quiet apartment we now called home had become more than just a safe place, it was a sanctuary. The morning sunlight spilling across the floor seemed gentler here, the air lighter, and my child's laughter brighter. I often thought about him, my husband, and the life we once shared, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He had chosen another woman, and in doing so, revealed who he truly was. I had chosen to disappear, not out of revenge, but out of love and protection for my child. I realized that life had given me a gift I hadn't expected, the freedom to create a life without fear, deceit, or pretense. I could nurture my child in peace, watch him grow with laughter and security, and finally breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. It took time, but I understood the truth about strength. It is not loud, it does not demand attention, it does not need validation. Strength is quiet, patient, and deliberate. It is the courage to protect what matters most, even when it requires walking away from everything familiar. I forgave, not for him, but for myself. To hold on to anger or resentment would have been to carry a burden I did not need. Forgiveness, in my case, was a way to free my heart, to reclaim my life, and to move forward with dignity. I also learned that love is not always about staying. Sometimes love means leaving, quietly, so those we care for most can thrive. Sometimes love means protecting innocence, nurturing joy, and building a foundation of trust and safety for the next chapter of life. Our days became simple, full of small joys and gentle routines. We cooked together, played together, and found laughter in small, ordinary moments. Every bedtime story, every morning hug, every shared meal became a celebration of life and love. Not the life we had lost, but the life we had chosen. I watched my child grow without fear or distraction, knowing I had made the right choice. I realized that even in betrayal, even in hurt, we have the power to write the next chapter of our story. Every small step, quiet planning, careful preparation, and courageous action had led us to this moment of peace. I felt proud, not of punishment, but of protection. I felt strength, not in anger, but in clarity. And I felt love, not as control, but as freedom. I often sit by the window in the evening, watching the sunlight fade into soft gold and shadows stretch across the floor. Sometimes I think of him, and sometimes I think of the life we might have had. But mostly, I think of my child, smiling, laughing, safe, and unaware of the storms we had navigated. I learned that life sometimes demands difficult choices. I learned that calm, dignity, and preparation can achieve more than confrontation or shouting ever could. And I learned that the quietest choices are often the most powerful. I have no regret. I have peace. And above all, I have love, the true, protective, and unwavering kind. If this emotional story of love, courage, and quiet strength touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe for more calm, real-life narratives. Stories of families, protection, and the strength to choose peace over chaos. Have you ever had to make a choice that protected someone you love above all else?